I want you to listen to me. I'm going to ask a question twice. First as discourse, and then as narrative. The question is, why? Why is the most fundamental of all the questions? And yet, in art schools, we hardly ever ask it. We content ourselves with what and how. Classes are about subjects and processes. If I ask you why you are here, you will answer in the obvious. I want to be an artist or designer. You avoid the fundamental nature of the question. Why frightens us. And it should, because it reveals our fallibility, both yours and your professors, myself included. But we rarely admit our fallibility. We protect ourselves, our relationship of professor and student, with discourse. Discourse is not fallible. Discourse is defined as speaking or writing authoritatively. It's a method you're all familiar with. It was used by your teachers at school, and it will be used by your professors here at RISD, myself included. It's what you, the students, expect. It's what you want, isn't it? A professor with answers, a professor with certainties, someone who will tell you what to do. A professor without doubts. Being a professor is a privilege and a plight. The privilege is obvious and needs no further comment. The plight does. The plight is that though we know things, we don't know things fundamentally. The plight is that you will assume we do, because the knowledge we do possess is protected by the authority of rank and by the method of discourse. You should know, right at the start, that your professors are fallible. They are learning too. I sometimes think subversively that schools, colleges, and universities are conspiracies of people pretending to know things fundamentally. Without doubt, knowledge atrophies. Without doubt, Braque and Picasso would not have questioned the validity of Renaissance space. Without doubt, Einstein would not have questioned the absoluteness of Newtonian space. These examples should give us a positive view of doubt, but they do not. Doubt makes us vulnerable. We react emotionally to it. In critiques, you will think that expressing doubt will weaken your presentation. Let me try and reassure you that it will not. It is certainty that will undermine your work. Certainty will prove that you are naive to knowledge. Stop pretending. Admit your fallibility. Show humility to the vastness of knowledge. The great gradient of knowledge has 5 stages. Stage 1. There are things we know. This is a conventional position for a professor in a classroom. Doubt is absent. Stage 2. There are things we don't know. This is a conventional position for a student in a classroom. Doubt is present and it is specific. Stage 3. There are things we know we don't know. This is an unconventional position for a professor in a classroom. Doubt is present, and it is specific, but an admission of it is unlikely. Stage 4, there are things we don't know we don't know. This is a condition of general doubt and is rarely present in a classroom. It is subversive to a relationship between a professor and a student. Finally, stage 5. There are things that are unknowable. This is a condition of absolute doubt. It is never present in the classroom because it is destructive to the concept of education. In my own way, I have tried to confess something to you, but it is an authoritative confession. It has no humility. I protected myself with the discursive method. I armored myself with logic, with categories, with structured ideas. I used the cadence of my voice to give a measured presentation and a tone that was authoritative. It is difficult, perhaps impossible, for a professor to admit fallibility. The educational context does not permit it. However, the artistic context not only permits fallibility, it encourages it. The narrative forms of literature and drama, in particular, are full of fallible people. The princes and kings of Shakespeare, authoritative figures all, are revealed as tragedies. I will show you what I mean with a more modern play, Equus. You may be familiar with it because in the most recent production in New York, the part of the boy was played by Daniel Radcliffe. Ostensibly, the play is about a boy who has blinded horses. The boy is sent to a psychiatric hospital where he's examined by the chief psychiatrist, Dr. Dysart. I'm going to play Dr. Dysart in a scene from the play. In it, Dysart thinks aloud about the issues the boy has raised in his own mind. Slowly, the tables are turned and Dysart is forced to examine himself. The certainties of his professional training crumble into doubts. Dysart will say in dramatic form what I have just said to you in discursive form. I want you to imagine. You can imagine, can't you? If you can't imagine, why are you here? I want you to imagine that the boy is not a patient. He's an art student like you. I want you to imagine that the place is a classroom in an art school, not a consulting room in a hospital. I want you to imagine that Dysart is not a doctor, but a professor of art. And I want you to imagine that Equus is, well, you will have to imagine what Equus is. You will have to look behind the mask. Equus. Now, the boy has gone off to rest, leaving me alone with Equus. I can hear the creature's voice. He's calling out to me from the black cave of the psyche. I shove in my dim little torch, and there he stands, waiting. He throws back his matted head. He opens his great square teeth and he says, "Why me? Why, ultimately me? Do you think you can account for me? Totally, infallibly, inevitably account for me? Poor Dr. Dysart." Of course, I've stared at such images before, or been stared at by them, whichever way you look at it. Weirdly now with me, it seems that they are staring at us. And in some quite palpable way, they precede us. Meaningless, but unsettling. In either case, this huge, implacable head is the most alarming yet. It asks questions I've avoided all my professional life. A child is born into a world of phenomena, all equal in their power to enslave. It sniffs, it sucks, it strokes its eyes over the whole unaccountable range. Suddenly one strikes, then another, then another. Why? Moments snap together like magnets to forge a chain of shackles. Why? I can trace them. I can, with time, pull them apart again. But why they were ever magnetized in the first place, why these particular moments of experience and no others, I do not know, if I can ever know what I am doing here. I don't mean clinically or socially, but fundamentally. These whys, these questions are fundamental. And yet, they have no place in a consulting room. So then, do any of us? This is the feeling. More and more displacement, relentless displacement. Account for me, says staring Equus. First, account for me. You see, I'm lost. What use, I should be asking myself, are questions like these to an overworked psychiatrist in a provincial hospital? They are worse than useless. They are, in fact, subversive. The thing is, I'm wearing that horse's head myself. All reined up in old knowledge and old assumptions, straining to jump clean-hoofed onto a new track of being I can only assume is there. I can't see it because my average educated head is held at the wrong angle. I can't jump because the bit forbids it. And my own meager force, my horsepower, if you like, is too little. The only thing I know for sure is this: a horse's head is finally unknowable to me. And yet, I handle children's heads, which I presume to be more complicated, at least in the area of my chief concern. In a way, it's not about the boy at all. The doubts have been there for years, piling up steadily in this dreary place. It's the extremity of this case that's made them active. I know extremity is the point. All the same, these doubts are not just vaguely worrying, they are intolerable. Forgive me. I'm not making much sense. Postscript. I wonder which of these two forms of verbal knowledge you preferred. The lecture I began with or the performance I ended with. One thing I do know is this. When you leave the auditorium, you will remember the performance and forget the lecture. Strange, really, isn't it? Because I know you understood the lecture more than the performance. Why is that? That's the question. Why again? Well, a lecture is verbal communication. A performance is verbal expression. Explanation is no match for expression. Never confuse art education for art experience. And one final remark. Sometime during your first year, you will have a reason to speak to the dean. When you go to her office, Equus will be there waiting for you. Remember,